Before I get started this morning, I want to shout out a couple of people that are here to come watch me. My mum, my brother, they're here. My friend Adib, who came all the way from Queensland to see me preach. And so if someone tells you that they can't make it to church, tell them about Adib, that he could make it from Queensland. We're talking about we need a move of God. We're talking about, that's our series, our sermon title, well, my sermon title, and our series title. And last week, Luke shared about how God rewards those who earnestly seek him, who... They're laughing at me as I'm speaking. That's going to be distracting. God rewards those who earnestly seek him. How it's not a transactional relationship with God where we just come to him when we need something and he'll just reward us. And it's not like that. It's not transactional. It's not like you're going to go buy something from a shop and that's it. That's all the relationship is. But rather it's like a friendship almost where you want to spend time with God. You want to understand God and develop a relationship with God as opposed to just, hey God, I need this. Hey God, I need that. Luke also shared about how we could take an approach where we sacrifice our first 15 minutes of a day to God. And I started actually implementing that into my kind of week after I heard the sermon. And I think it's a great way to develop a relationship with God because it's very hard to find time in our busy lives to, sit down, read, sit down, worship, sit down, pray, whatever it may be. And so devoting those first 15 minutes allows you to prioritize God firstly, focus on God, before the distractions of the world come into it, before you pick up your phone and you check the football score or whatever it may be, and the chaos of the world comes in. Hughie also touched on this. We have a fast coming up. March 28th was the date. And so I encourage you that if, maybe you're wanting to fast something, I encourage you to take that step of faith, to be desperate for God to see him move. Now, if there's something you're wanting to see in your life, take that step of faith and fast something. Maybe it's a meal, maybe it's a phone, maybe it's whatever it may be. Take that step of faith. And taking that, making that movement, making that step of faith will result in a move of God, which is what we want. That's what we want to see, right? That's what we want to see. But if we want God to move, it's something that we need to envision. It's something that we need to see. We need to see this movement happen. And with that, when we can envision it, we need faith that that'll come true. And that's what I'm talking about this morning. And one of the things is that I've written down here is that we have faith in a lot of things, right? You guys have faith right now in your chairs that they'll hold you up. You have faith in a pilot when they're flying a plane or a conductor when you're driving a train. You don't know what's going on in there. You don't know what's going on in the engine, what's actually making this metal thing fly in the sky because it defies all laws of physics to me. It doesn't make sense. It's heavy. How does it? I don't know. Yeah, Nick gets it. But we have faith in the pilot that they know what they're doing. And despite any turbulence that might happen, we still have faith that, the pilot will get us from point A to point B. The conductor will get us from point A to point B, except if you're a Sydney train and you don't want to work. But often, it's a little bit different when I think with God. I think we have faith in God. We know that God can move in our lives. But when turbulence starts, when chaos starts, when the world gets a bit noisy and you start seeing, and you start to lose focus of God, it's easy for us to think that God doesn't respond to our faith. It's easy for us to think that, when we get caught up in our day-to-day life and we have challenges that we face and we have things that we have to overcome, that God isn't there with us, that we're alone, we might be alone because of how busy everything is and we just get kind of isolated. But can I remind you this morning that God does actually respond to our faith. God does hear our prayers, and he does respond to our faith. Hebrews 11 talks about faith, which is my next slide. It defines it well, I think. It says that, before we get into it, I might pray before we open the word. So, Heavenly Father, Lord God, I just thank you that we can be here this morning and that we can hear your word, Father. I pray that you speak to us and that you can stir something in our heart that allows us to be reminded that you do respond to our faith, that you actually do care about us, and that we can have a hope and we can have a faith again in your promise. Praise in your name. Amen. So, Hebrews 11, verse 1 says, "Now faith is the confidence of what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what was not seen, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible." I got into a uni debate about this, actually, which is a weird kind of thing. It's a class about politics and religion. And we got asked to define religion. And the main aspect that I think is that religion it's a faith-based thing, right? It's you have faith in something that you can't see. It's dependent on faith. A weird place to get into that debate, and it was a little sidetrack, but that's what this is. If I prepared my sermon a week earlier, I reckon I would have been able to win that debate easy. But faith is the confidence what we hope for and the assurance about what we do not see. Verse 6 says that it is impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. And that's what Luke touched on last week. We need to earnestly seek God. And what Hughie's touched on this morning, that our faith pleases God. What I feel that this passage explains is that faith is not just a concept based on trust. It's not just a hope. It's not just I've got to trust in this. It's actually a practical expression of that hope, that desire to draw near to God and his righteousness. It's more of a verb, I think, than a noun. It's like something you have faith, so you act in faith. You don't just have faith, so you just believe, God's going to heal me here, but you don't do anything with it. Faith is that you actually step out, you make an action towards that. We must act out our faith. It says in the Bible that faith without works is dead, and we need to have more than just a trust in God, but an active expression, an active representation, an active portrayal of that faith. Yes. My first point this morning, beautiful. God responds to faith. Very simple. I could leave here now. There you go. That's what I've been saying the last 5 minutes. Job done. See you later. It's very simple, very straightforward, but I think it's crucial to be reminded of it because he actually does respond to our faith. It's not just like and I'm not saying, I've said it a lot so far, and I will say it a lot, so strap in. But it's very easy to just think, oh yeah, God does respond to my faith. All right, move on. He actually does respond to our faith individually. Responds to Chris's faith, responds to Jude's, responds to, who else can I pick on? Sharon. Responds to everyone. Individually, he responds to our faith. I'll give you an example. And my mum features in this story, so make sure you give her a little look and a laugh when you hear her name. About 5 to 6 years ago, I feel like I had a moment where I depended almost entirely on God, right? It was a moment where Pastor Peter preached a message similar to one that I'm doing this morning about faith and how we should step out to see God move in our lives. He asked us to write something down. Towards the end of the sermon, songs playing, whatever. He asked us to write something down that we're believing for, that we're desiring. And at this moment of time, I'd been a part of the church for a couple of years now, and something I really wanted to get into, it's weird to say it out loud, I wanted to get into the worship team, right? I didn't know how to do it, didn't know who to speak to. It was a bit like, whatever. Anyway, I wanted to get involved in it, but I didn't know how to go about it. But it was something that was just in my heart, on my mind. I just didn't know what to do. I was tossing and turning about it because the only person that had heard me sing really was my mum. And as soon as I can believe her, I do believe her. But if you're a parent, you're going to hype up your kid regardless. So I didn't know whether to fully believe it. I was just kind of yeah, thanks, Mum, appreciate it. She wanted me to go on The Voice Kids. Okay, so it's I believed her, but didn't know if she just wanted me on the TV. So I felt called to write something down. Just felt called to step out, just write out, I want to join the worship team. So I just did it. I wrote it down. To me, it was a very low risk, high reward thing because no one was going to see what I wrote down. I could write it down, fold it up, put it at the front, done. See you later, whatever. I wrote it down not knowing what would happen, but I had a faith where I just depended on God. That I just said, God, if you're in this, if you want this to happen, it'll happen, right? And I knew that if God was in that desire, that it would occur, and it did, right? The next week, we went on a seniors youth camp or something, and I got an opportunity to actually, around a campfire, sing a bit, whatever. That was cool. It was fun. It was weird. At that point, I was like, oh, this is weird. It's only a week. That was crazy. And then the next week, I got asked to jump on band, and I was like, whoa, this is really weird. This is crazy, and that was a pretty crucial moment in my faith, because I feel like I learned then to, you could just depend on God, and he would answer that. That's not to say that, that was a quick turnaround, right? 2 weeks, pretty quick. But, that's not to say that he'll respond, straight away every time, or he'll respond in 2 weeks every time, or respond in 2 months, 2 years. It might take a while. It might take a long time. But that God does respond to our faith. The prayer you have, the desire you have might not be answered on the spot. It might take a bit longer. But, I've got things that I'm praying and I'm believing for that I'm still yet to see. But I know that, and I'm reminded that God does respond to our faith as long as we keep having that faith. We still stay strong to that. Spoke about myself, but I feel like it's probably important to speak about people in the Bible too. In the Bible, we see God respond to their faith, right? We see Moses raising his staff to split the sea. He has a faith that God will split the sea, that God will save his people. So he does it. He raises his staff, splits the sea, right? We see the disciples, they get told to cast their nets to the other side of the boat to catch some fish. So they do it. And they have faith that that'll happen. And they catch a whole lot of fish. It's weird, right? So many fish. We have the woman with the bleeding issue. 12 years she went. 12 years of illness, of this issue. And she would have gone through so many times of, seeing doctors, seeking different treatments, everything like that. But when she had heard that, Jesus was in town, massive crowd around, but she still squeezed her way through because she had a faith that God will heal her if she gets to touch her garment. Just get his attention. She had a faith that God would respond to that. Peter walking on the water. Very simple one, He sees Jesus on the water. Jesus calls him out. He has a faith that he'll be all right, and he's all right. He walks on the water, right? Goes on to say some other stuff, which we'll get into, but for now, let's talk about that. David having faith that he could kill Goliath, right? David had, and I preached on this last time I got up here, that, David killed the bear, he killed the lion. These were things that God had challenged him with, that tested him to prepare him for Goliath, right? He had this faith, he had a faith that he would make it through the bear, that he'd make it through the lion, that he would make it through Goliath as well, and he would actually be able to defeat Goliath, and, he did. That's how we know the story went. So if God can respond to the faith of all these people, why do we often think that he can't respond to ours, right? I think there might be, I've got two reasons written down here. One of which is because I think we can often think that just because they're written in the Bible, they're some kind of perfect person. They're some kind of amazing person. The other reason is that the world around us, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, it gets busy, it gets chaotic, it gets hectic. And through that, or in that, we often forget the power that God has and the power that we can claim when we have faith. The power that God has that even when our faith lapses, when we have a moment where we stumble or we fall down, that he's still there regardless. That God's still there to catch us, just like he did with Peter, which we'll get into. If we could go to my next point, please. There it is. So God is there regardless. And I touched on this. I said that it's often easy for us to have a lapse of faith when everything around us is going AWOL, when everything around us is going belly up. We don't like it. But God has a grace for this. He is a loving Father. He loves us unconditionally. That even when we have a lapse of faith, he's there. And we see it, in that parable of the prodigal son, right? Like the son walks away. He's got this amazing life, but he chooses to walk away from his father. Go lives his own life, but he comes back, and the person that's waiting for him is his father, right? He insults him before he leaves, not when he arrives, but he insults him before he leaves and all this kind of stuff, turns away from him, walks away, spends a bit of time away by himself in like a pig farm and whatnot, comes back, and his father's there with welcome arms, welcoming him home, loves on him and prepares a feast and all that kind of stuff. And we see that with him, but we also see it with Peter, which I touched on before, but I'm going to go into it properly here. So Matthew 14:22-33 says that immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake while he sent the people home. After sending them home, he went up to the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. I've lost it. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost!" But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage, I am here." I love that bit, like, I'm here, just obvious. Hey, I'm here, what's up? Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you, walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said. So Peter went over to the other side of the boat, and he walked towards Jesus. Peter has a faith that he will be fine, that he's with Jesus, he'll be fine. But he doesn't just start walking on the water, right? He doesn't have this hope, this desire, this belief, and he just doesn't just start walking on the water. But he actually has to step out of the boat, right? I feel like we often sometimes just think, oh, I'll pray for this, but then you won't act on it, right? You'll pray for something, you're believing for something, but then what are we doing to act it out? Maybe we're praying for a job or financial breakthrough, but what are we doing to act that out? Are we bothering to search for jobs? Or are we just like, oh, it'll just fall in our laps? Sometimes it might, but I think it's important that we act on our faith as well. That's because faith, and I've said this throughout, and I'll just keep saying it, faith is more than just a hope. It's more than just a trust. It's more than just a noun. It's an action. We have to step out in our faith. And once he's out on the water, when Peter's out on the water, he's face to face with him, and then, where is it? He starts to sink. Yeah, he was terrified, began to sink. Now, not even like, so actually, let me get back to reading this and then we'll get into it. So, but when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why did you doubt me?" When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped, and the disciples worshipped him. "You really are the Son of God," they exclaimed. So Peter has a lapse of faith because he notices this chaos around him. He notices what's going on. He starts to doubt. And I only realized this when I was proper reading through this as I was preparing, not even 10 verses earlier, Jesus performed a miracle and fed the 5,000. Like literally 10 verses, maybe 15. A couple verses earlier, he just performed a miracle. And yet still Peter doubts his faith. So he's face to face with Jesus. He's staring him right in the eyes. He's seen him perform a miracle, and yet still he doubts his faith. I often think that sometimes we challenge our own faith. We think that maybe my faith isn't good enough. Maybe it's not worthy enough. But then if we remember times like this where he was face to face with him, he had seen him perform miracles countless times up to now. We've never seen Jesus face to face. And yet I think that we need to be encouraged that our faith is strong, that our faith is actually, we have a strong faith. Despite not having this, like these guys lived life with Jesus every single day, and yet they still doubted. But anyway, so Peter's sinking, he's drowning, having a good time, having a swim. Shouts out, "Save me, Lord." And Jesus immediately steps in. Doesn't hesitate, doesn't be like, "I told you." Like it doesn't, he immediately steps in like the loving father that he is. Despite the flaws that Peter has, that lapse of faith, that doubt, despite that flaw, there's a grace. Jesus has a grace for him. Jesus still responded to that initial faith, despite those flaws. The same thing can be said about those people from earlier that I was talking about. Moses, the guy that split the sea, the guy that freed the people. Awesome guy, cool guy. Was an angry dude, pretty angry. He was impatient. The whole reason he left Egypt was because he killed someone. And God still responded to him. God still used him. God still responded to that faith despite the flaws that Moses had. The woman with the bleeding issue, she tried absolutely everything to fix her issue. So we can probably just assume that she was pretty afraid. She was scared. She didn't know. This was a last-ditch hope, Hail Mary. This is the last attempt, I think. She's like, if this doesn't work, I don't know what will. So she's afraid. And yet, despite this fear, she persevered, and Jesus responded to that. Jesus healed her. And like I just touched on, Peter, on that very day, saw a miracle, saw it happen, and yet he still doubted. But Jesus was still there and responded to that faith. Immediately coming in, immediately being there, regardless of our flaws. The point to say is that, we've all got flaws. Like the people in the Bible, they're not perfect. There's one person who's perfect, name starts with a J. We have our flaws. We're human. We are. Shocker. It's often easy to shrug off that, the things that we're hoping for because these people in the Bible seem perfect, but they weren't. Neither are we. We may be angry, might be afraid, might be doubtful, might be late to church, might be broken, and yet despite all of this, we can still see our miracles come to fruition. We can still see the things that we're hoping for come true if we have our faith in Jesus. Right? Despite all the flaws, as broken, as cracked as you might think you are, Jesus sees us as perfect. Right? He's already done everything he can do to cover your sins. And so it's just a faith that we need. Right? For that to happen, for the things that we're envisioning, the things that we want to see come true, we need to have a faith. We need to hope again. We just need to say yes to God, which is my next point, please. There we go. Just say yes. So I'm currently reading this book that Luke's told me to read. Don't tell him, but I've only read like 50 pages, and he gave it to me 3 weeks ago. So I'm a little bit slow with that. Yeah, thank you. So I'm currently somewhat reading this book about a man's journey to faith, or of faith, rather. He takes his approach of ready, fire, then aim, right? And for people that went to state conference, you would have heard that one before. But ready, fire, aim, which is a bit weird to think about, because if, in different contexts, it could end up pretty bad. But, it's that idea of just saying yes to God before thinking about it, knowing that, if we place our faith in his hands and allow for his guidance to direct us, we'll be sweet. We'll be good. And not only will we be safe, not only will we be covered, but we'll be more fruitful than we could ever imagine. Right? We'll be fruitful in everything that we do if we just say yes. If, we just take that no hesitation approach. Just say yes. Just fire. Go for it. Now, saying yes to God isn't always an easy thing. It's something that will invite us into one of the most mysterious, unpredictable, yet rewarding life that we can be offered on earth. What it'll lead to is sometimes feeling as though we're walking on water like Peter. We're on top of the world, we're doing awesome, we're loving life. And other times it might feel like we're having a swim like Peter. And yet despite this feeling that we may get out of it, of that swimming, drowning feeling, Jesus is there to catch us immediately, every single time, without a doubt. Every single time he's there. If you stray a little bit off your course, Jesus will bring you right back on. Now, walking on water can mean a lot of things. The words risky, rash, bold, brave, silly, dumb, crazy, courageous are a couple. But one thing it's not is boring. It's not a boring life. It's fun. It's like a youth. It's like a youth every Friday. Never boring. Always something going on. Love it. Got to get my blood pressure checked. Now, anyone that says it, my bad. Anyone that says that their faith is boring is following someone other than the God that I know, that we know. If you say your faith is boring, what are you doing? Are you not jumping on a flight down from Queensland to go to church? That doesn't sound boring. You think I'm up here because I'm bored? No, I'm not actually. Jesus took great risks with people. And the reason he could take these risks is because he knew that if they said yes, regardless of the state that they're in, regardless of how cracked they may seem they are, how broken they may seem that they are, how flawed, how imperfect, whatever, that Jesus can make the necessary adjustments to their life. Jesus can make the necessary adjustments along the way. Use us while he fixes us. Change your way, something like that. He can adjust us on the way. The necessary adjustments that could correct our flaws over time. If I can use an analogy, before I do this analogy, anyone heard of ChatGPT? Has anyone heard of that? Anthony has. Now, I didn't use that for myself. I use it for my analogy. I couldn't think of an analogy. Okay, so I use it for my analogy. All right, relax. Okay, it's not nothing. Okay, don't tell my uni. An analogy for God responding to faith is that of a GPS system guiding a driver to their destination. When we have a faith in God, it can be like having a GPS system that helps us navigate the twists and the turns of life, guiding us towards our ultimate destination of fulfillment, purpose, and inner peace. Whoa, crazy. So original. Just as a GPS system requires us to trust its direction and follow its guidance, our faith in God requires us to trust in his plan for our lives and follow the path that he has set before us. Even when the road ahead looks bumpy, looks uncertain, looks windy, you don't want to go down it, our faith can give us the courage and the strength that we need to persevere and stay on the course. So regardless of the challenges you're facing, regardless of how lost you may seem that you are, if our faith is in Jesus, then we're just following a GPS, right? We're just following the way to get to our destination. Now, just as a GPS system may recalculate its route if the driver takes the wrong turn or encounters unexpected obstacles, our faith in God can help us to find our way back onto the right path when we stumble or face setbacks. By trusting in God's guidance and following his direction, we can ultimately arrive at our destination of living a life of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment, and help others to find their own way as well. If I could get the band possibly to come up, please, that would be awesome. Now, this is just an analogy, just an AI-written analogy, but I think it's so true, and it's such good advice for us to have faith in Christ. Have a faith in Christ where we just trust Him, no hesitation. He'll be right. Like, He'll look after me. He'll care for me. He'll protect me. He'll keep me safe, without hesitation, just to say yes. Matthew 4:18-22 says, it talks about this actually, because I feel, again, probably should not just use AI. One day Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee. He saw two brothers, Simon, also called Peter, and Andrew, throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them, "Come, follow me, and I will show you," hold on, where have we gone? "And I will show you how to fish for people." And they left their nets at once and followed him. A little farther up on the shore, they saw two other brothers, James and John, sitting in their boat with their father, Zebedee, repairing their nets. And he called to them too. They immediately followed him, leaving the boat and their father behind. Now, I learned about this in one of our meeting course things, that at this point, Jesus had known them for 18 months, give or take. So they had already seen miracles being performed prior to this point. But they had no hesitation, right? They left their nets at once and followed him. And then down below it says, they immediately followed him. Just like immediately Jesus comes in to save us, they immediately chose to follow Jesus because they knew that, they didn't want to give this opportunity up, right? They've been at this point, they're pretty certain this guy's the Messiah. So they're just like, oh, if I've got this opportunity to go here, not only will I get to see amazing miracles performed, not only will I get to learn from the Son of God, but also, I'll be corrected along the way. I'll be adjusted along the way. They knew this because they'd already seen him work at this point. And they had no hesitation. They just said yes to God. They had a faith that, where even despite their flaws, they knew that if they just said yes to him, had a faith in him, not only would they be safe, but they'd be fruitful in everything they do. And I think that we need to be reminded of that this morning. Sometimes we have a hesitation. We think, oh, maybe I should just think about this. Maybe I should just take a second to think about it. And then that second turns into a minute, turns into a day, turns into a month. And then you're spending your whole life thinking about it. I think sometimes we just need to say yes and have a faith that God will look after us. God will fulfill our promises. Now, it might seem scary, but, here we go, hold on. A zero hesitation type faith that regardless of the strong winds that may come and go, regardless of the challenges that we might face along the way, we still trust and act our faith in God out. A faith that leads us to step out to see whatever is coming, and we're believing for whatever is coming will be aligned with God, will be God's will, and it will come to be. It might seem scary, but when we align our faith and align our focus and place our trust into God's hands, we can't be shaken. And that's an awesome song that we were singing earlier. Depending on God, depending on his firm foundation. Our house is built on you, so it won't be moved, My hope is built on you, something like that. Winds came, rain blew. No, all the way around. But my hope is built on you. And I think that, in the last couple of years, it can be a little bit hard. Maybe there's things going on currently in your life where it can be hard to place your hope in Jesus again. Place your hope and your faith in that to see amazing. You might discount yourself. You might disqualify yourself because you think that you're not worthy of it. But Jesus looks at us as perfect. God looks at us as perfect. He sees us as his perfect child. He loves us. And all he wants, and I think something that Hughie shared as well, God's just telling you to, just come. He's reaching out. You just gotta join on, right? You just gotta align yourself with that. Have a faith that God can move in your life again, whatever it is you're facing. I spoke a little bit earlier about how I took a step of faith, right? With the paper and the pens. Remember that story? I want to give you guys an opportunity to do that, because to me, that was a crucial moment in my faith. And, up the front, there are some pens and paper. If you could grab those, please. And I would love that, while this song is playing, if you feel you've got something on your heart, anything. It could be as simple as wanting to join a new ministry. It could be as serious as a serious illness, or maybe for a breakthrough, or to see this person come to church, see that person come to church. Nothing is off limits. here's something you're desiring, that you're praying for, write it down. It could be anything. If you're feeling like it's something you need to do, that you want to do, I encourage you, just say yes to God. Right? If you're feeling called, maybe it's something you've been thinking about for a while, whatever it is, just fire, then aim. Think about it later, right? Because who knows, like if we just place our hope, place our faith in God, take that step forward, like who knows what God has to offer for us. But in addition to it, because we have to step out in faith, actually faith is action, not just a hope, a trust. I want you guys to write something that you could do down, right? If it's wanting to join a ministry, who do you speak to? You write, I'm going to speak to this person. It's not something that I'm going to see, not something that Pastor Luke's going to see, not something Hughie's going to see, not something Pastor Catherine's going to see, Pastor Hughie. It's not something that we're going to see. It's just between you and God. It's just between, no one, like there's no strings attached to this. Zero risk, high reward. What can you practically do to see what you're wanting for, what you're desiring for to come to fruition? Maybe it's as simple as changing the way you speak about something. Maybe it's something where you just alter your language a bit from, I'm looking for a job, I can't find a job, there's no job, that negative language to, can't find a job yet. God's got something in store for me, just don't know it yet. It's coming, whatever it is. Maybe it's something as radical as, quitting a job, going for a promotion, something that seems unattainable, seems completely wrong, but maybe you're just feeling called to do it. Maybe it's something like that, where you see something where you didn't even, so let's say it's quitting a job, right? Quitting a job, going for promotion, something that seems unattainable, but you do that risk anyway. You take that step of faith anyway, because you want to see a financial breakthrough. And you think that if you're being called to do that, by God, that maybe you just have a step of faith, just trust in Him, that He would actually see that promise come true. Because like I touched on a bit earlier, like it's so easy for us to get caught up with the business of life, walk out this auditorium, go grab a couple brownies and just go on with your life and just pretend like you just, you come to church, sing, you worship, whatever, and just go about with your life in the craziness of what it is. But if we just take a moment to actually revel in it, to actually see God move, we're setting an atmosphere here for you to take a step of faith out in what might be one of the easiest places to do it. The band are going to sing that song about building a foundation on God. And so I encourage you that in this moment, we'll stand firstly. That's really important. And so I encourage you that maybe, and if you're not feeling called to do something, maybe if you're not feeling called to take a step out, maybe you can just have a conversation with God. Maybe you could just pray about it. Maybe if it's just maybe you know what you want, you're desiring for, but you don't know really what step to take. Maybe you just pray on God for a minute. Maybe you don't have to write anything down at all, whatever it may be. But I encourage you guys, have that step of faith. There's no time like now to just have no hesitation, just to move, just take a step, and just see God work in our promise. I'm going to take that away.